Dear listener, settle in, let the warmth of your bed wrap around you like a soft blanket, and let me take you back to a summer long, long ago, 323 BCE, in the city of Babylon. The air is thick with the scent of spices from the market, the murmur of 100 languages blending in the streets, and the distant clip of hooves on stone. This is a city at the heart of an empire so vast it stretches from the snow-capped mountains of Macedonia to the sun-baked plains of India, from the shores of the Black Sea to the rushing cataracts of the Nile. For 13 years, this empire has been held together by one man, Alexander, the golden-haired king of Macedonia, who marched through deserts, scaled mountains, and stared down kings. But today, the hum of the city fades. The unthinkable has happened. Alexander is dead. He was only 32. No one saw it coming. Not the soldiers who'd followed him through sand and snow, not the scribes who chronicled his every victory, not even the wise men who claimed to read the future in the stars. He'd survived arrow wounds in battle, fevers in the jungles of India, and the bitter cold of the Hindu Kush. Yet here he lies, in the grand palace of Nebuchadnezzar, his body already a silent prize in a game no one knew they were playing. Word spreads like wildfire through the streets, then out along the trade routes, carried by merchants and messengers. Farmers in Egypt pause with their plows, wondering if the grain ships will still come. Greek settlers in new cities like Alexandria huddle in their homes, asking if they'll ever see their mothers again. Persian nobles in Susa polish their swords, unsure if their lands will be taken. Egyptian priests light extra incense at the temple of Ammonius, praying the new ruler will honor their gods. Indian princes in the Punjab sharpen their spears, ready to claim back their kingdoms. For a moment, it feels like the whole world is holding its breath. In the royal palace, the men who were once Alexander's closest companions gather around his body. They are rough, tough soldiers, most from the rocky hills of Macedonia. Antigonus One-Eye, who'd fought for Alexander's father, Philip II, and lost an eye in the process. Ptolemy, a clever man who claimed he was descended from the hero Heracles. Seleucus, tall and broad-shouldered, with a mind as sharp as his battle-axe, and Cassander, a young noble who'd always hated how Alexander loved Persian clothes and Eastern customs. Once, they'd shared tents on campaign, drunk wine under the stars, and laughed about the time they'd gotten lost in the desert. Now, they stand stiffly, eyes narrowing as they measure each other up, weighing loyalties, calculating risks, wondering who will grab the power Alexander left behind. Outside the palace walls, the empire waits, fragile as a spider's web. There's no clear air, no son old enough to wear the crown. Alexander's wife, Roxana, is pregnant, but the child hasn't been born yet. No one even knows if it will be a boy. His half-brother, Philip Aridius, is alive, but everyone knows he's not fit to rule. His mind is like a broken pot, pieces scattered and impossible to put back together. On his deathbed, Alexander supposedly held out his ring to Perdiccas, one of his most trusted generals, but did he mean rule in my place, or just keep things safe until my son is born? No one can agree, and that's where the trouble starts. Think of it like this. Imagine you and your friends build a huge sandcastle on the beach, with towers and moats and a flag on top. Then, suddenly, the oldest kid, who was in charge, has to leave. Everyone starts arguing about who gets to be in charge next, who gets to add the next tower, who even gets to touch the flag. That's exactly what's happening here. Alexander built the sandcastle of his empire, but he never told anyone how to keep it from washing away. In the days that follow, as workers prepare a coffin of gold and ivory for Alexander, the arguments turn fierce. The infantry soldiers, rough men from the Macedonian hills, shout that Philip Aridius should be king. He's a son of Philip II, they roar. He's one of us. But the cavalry officers, Alexander's elite guard, back Perdiccas. We should wait for Roxana's child, they say. A real heir, not a broken man. For a moment, swords are drawn. The infantry storms the palace, taking control of the royal quarters, while the cavalry marches out of Babylon, camped on the plains outside, ready to fight. Finally, they strike a deal. Philip Aridius will be king, called Philip III. If Roxana has a son, the boy will be co-king, named Alexander IV. Perdiccas, holding Alexander's ring, will be regent, the one who actually runs things, at least for a while. They split the empire into satrapies, big provinces, each run by one of Alexander's generals. Ptolemy gets Egypt, a rich land with the Nile to water its fields. Lysimachus takes Thrace, the rough country north of Greece. Antigonus I gets Phrygia, in Asia Minor. It seems like a plan, but plans can unravel faster than a loose thread. And unravel it does. News arrives in Babylon that Athens has revolted. The Greeks, tired of paying taxes to Macedonia, have risen up, and the rebellion, called the Lamian War, spreads like wildfire through the cities of Greece. Perdiccas sends Craterus, one of Alexander's oldest friends, to put it down. Meanwhile, Roxana gives birth to a son, little Alexander IV. For a moment, it feels like maybe, just maybe, the empire will hold. But then Perdiccas makes a terrible mistake. He lures Meleager, the leader of the infantry, into a trap and has him executed. Fear ripples through the ranks. If Perdiccas can turn on a friend, who's safe? The real betrayal, though, comes from Ptolemy. Alexander's body, preserved in honey, a trick the Babylonians used to keep bodies from rotting, is supposed to be taken back to Macedonia for burial. But as the funeral procession, with its golden coffin, pulled by 60 mules, moves through Syria, Ptolemy and his soldiers ride out to meet it. They don't fight. Instead, they persuade the guards to hand over the body. Ptolemy takes it south, to Egypt. This isn't just stealing a body. It's a message: I have Alexander, Ptolemy is saying, so I have the right to rule. He buries Alexander first in Memphis, the old Egyptian capital, then later moves him to a magnificent tomb in the new city of Alexandria, a city Alexander himself founded. Perdiccas is livid. How dare he shouts. He gathers the royal army and marches toward Egypt, determined to punish Ptolemy and get the body back. But in Syria, his army gets stuck. He tries 3 times to cross the Nile, and each time, the river's strong current sweeps away his soldiers. His men grow angry and scared. One night, Seleucus and a group of officers creep into Perdiccas's tent and stab him to death. With Perdiccas dead, the generals meet again, this time in a place called Triparadisus. They redraw the map. Antipater, an old general who'd stayed in Macedonia to keep things running while Alexander was away, becomes the new regent. Seleucus gets Babylon, a rich city on the Euphrates. Antigonus I is put in charge of hunting down Eumenes, a Greek general who'd stayed loyal to Perdiccas. But peace doesn't last. When Antipater dies in 319 BCE, he surprises everyone by leaving the regency to Polyperchon, an old soldier, instead of his own son Cassander. Cassander is furious. He rebels, teaming up with Antigonus and Ptolemy. Now the empire is split again, with armies fighting in Greece, Asia Minor, and the Middle East. Eumenes, outnumbered but clever, rallies the Silver Shields, veteran soldiers who'd fought with Philip and Alexander, their armor polished to a shine. For a while, he holds off Antigonus. But at the Battle of Gabiene, in 316 BCE, Antigonus captures the Silver Shields' families and their treasure. The old soldiers, desperate to get their wives and children back, betray Eumenes. They hand him over to Antigonus, who has him executed. With Eumenes dead, Antigonus becomes the most powerful man in Asia. Antigonus seizes the royal treasury at Susa, 25,000 talents of silver, enough to buy a small kingdom, and starts replacing any governor who isn't loyal to him. Seleucus, scared for his life, flees to Egypt to join Ptolemy. By 315 BCE, the empire is a patchwork of warring states. The royal family, Philip III, little Alexander IV, and Alexander's mother Olympias, are just pawns. Olympias, fierce and clever, briefly takes power in Macedonia, executing Philip III and his wife. But Cassander fights back, captures her, and has her killed in 316 BCE. Alexander IV and Roxana are locked up in a castle in Amphipolis, their fate sealed. Antigonus, now calling himself King of Asia, issues a decree: all Greeks are free. It sounds noble, but really, he wants them to fight for him. Ptolemy, Cassander, Lysimachus, and Seleucus form a coalition against him. For 4 years, they fight across the Mediterranean. Seleucus, with Ptolemy's help, sneaks back to Babylon and takes back his satrapy. In 311 BCE, they make peace. We'll recognize Alexander IV as king until he's an adult, they say. But it's a lie. In 310 or 309 BCE, Cassander secretly poisons the 13-year-old Alexander and his mother Roxana. No one ever finds their bodies. Cassander doesn't want a tomb to become a symbol of rebellion. With that, the Argead dynasty, which had ruled Macedonia for centuries, is gone. In 306 BCE, Antigonus crowns himself king after his son Demetrius defeats Ptolemy's fleet at the Battle of Salamis. One by one, the others follow: Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in Babylon, Lysimachus in Thrace, Cassander in Macedonia. Now there are 5 Macedonian kings, each ruling a piece of Alexander's empire. The final showdown comes in 301 BCE, at the Battle of Ipsus. Antigonus, now in his 80s but still tough as leather, leads his army against the coalition. He has 70,000 infantry, 10,000 cavalry, and 75 war elephants. The coalition has similar numbers, but Seleucus brings a secret weapon: 480 war elephants, a gift from an Indian king named Chandragupta Maurya. The battle is fierce. Demetrius, Antigonus's son, leads a cavalry charge that smashes through the enemy lines. But he chases the fleeing soldiers too far, leaving his father unprotected. Seleucus unleashes his elephants, creating a wall that traps Demetrius. With no cavalry to help, Antigonus's lines collapse. The old king stands his ground, shouting, "Demetrius will come back." But he's surrounded and killed, his body pierced by javelins. Ipsus ends any hope of reuniting Alexander's empire. The victors split Antigonus's lands. Lysimachus gets Western Asia Minor, Seleucus takes Syria, Cassander keeps Macedonia, and Ptolemy holds Egypt. Demetrius escapes with 9,000 soldiers, but his family's power is broken. And so, 32 years after Alexander's death, the empire he built is gone. In its place are three major kingdoms: Ptolemaic Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in Asia, and Antigonid Macedonia, and a handful of smaller states. They'll fight, ally, and betray each other for centuries, but the dream of a single, world empire dies at Ipsus. What's remarkable, though, is what does survive: Alexander's vision of a world where Greek ideas mix with Eastern traditions. In the cities these kings build, in the art they commission, in the way people from different lands live and trade together, something new is born. It's not the empire Alexander wanted, but it's something extraordinary. As you drift toward sleep, imagine a merchant from Alexandria haggling with a Persian scribe in Babylon. They speak Greek, but they laugh at each other's stories of home. An Egyptian priest teaches a Macedonian soldier how to read the stars. This is the world the successors made, messy, divided, but full of surprises. Let your mind wander now, to a world where the dust of war is finally settling. It's 301 BCE, and the Battle of Ipsus has split Alexander's empire into pieces, like a cake divided among greedy guests. But instead of crumbling, these pieces start to take shape, strong, distinct, each with its own flavor. For the next 80 years, three great kingdoms will rise: Ptolemaic Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in Asia, and Antigonid Macedonia. And in the spaces between them, something extraordinary will grow, a culture that blends Greek ideas with Eastern traditions, like a beautiful melody made from two different instruments. Let's start with Egypt, where Ptolemy has made himself king. You might remember him as the one who stole Alexander's body. Now he's turned that bold move into a kingdom. Egypt is a gift for a ruler. The Nile River floods every year, leaving rich, black soil that grows enough grain to feed armies. Deserts to the east and west keep invaders out, and the Mediterranean to the north makes trade easy. Ptolemy knows he's not Egyptian, so he plays a clever game. He wears the crown of the pharaohs, prays to Egyptian gods like Isis and Osiris, and builds temples to win over the priests. To the Greek settlers, he's a fellow Macedonian, keeping their language and laws alive. It's like speaking two languages, one for the locals, one for your friends, and somehow making both feel natural. Ptolemy's greatest creation is the city of Alexandria, named for Alexander himself. It sits where the Nile meets the sea, a perfect spot for ships from all over the world. He builds a huge lighthouse, the Pharos, that towers over the harbor, its fire visible for miles. But even more amazing is the Library of Alexandria. Ptolemy orders every ship that docks to hand over any books on board. They're copied, and the originals stay in the library. By the 3rd century BCE, it holds 400,000 scrolls, plays by Sophocles, histories by Herodotus, even Egyptian myths translated into Greek. Scholars from across the Mediterranean come to study here, like bees drawn to honey. Now, travel east, to the vast lands ruled by Seleucus and his descendants, the Seleucid Empire. This kingdom is a patchwork, from Syria to Persia, from Asia Minor to the borders of India. It's so big that Seleucus knows he can't rule it like Egypt. Instead, he builds new cities, Antioch in Syria, Seleucia on the Tigris, and fills them with Greek and Macedonian settlers. These cities are little pieces of Greece in the east. They have markets, gymnasia, gyms where boys learn to wrestle and recite poetry, and theaters where plays by Euripides are performed. Over time, the locals start to learn Greek, send their kids to Greek schools, and even wear Greek clothes. It's not that they forget their own traditions. Persian kings still have their royal fires, Babylonian priests still study the stars. It's that they add new layers, like putting a new song on an old record. Seleucus's successors keep expanding this Greek East. Antiochus I, his son, builds temples that honor both Zeus and Persian gods. He even marries a Persian princess, blending the two royal lines. By 250 BCE, the Seleucid Empire is a place where a Greek merchant can do business in Babylon using Greek coins, while a Persian noble can read Homer in his spare time. It's messy, sometimes tense, but somehow it works, like a big, noisy family where everyone speaks a little differently but still understands each other. Up north, in Macedonia and Greece, the Antigonid kings have a harder time. The Greeks, who once fought for freedom against Persia, hate being ruled by Macedonians. Cities like Athens and Sparta rebel again and again, and the Antigonids have to put down revolts almost as often as they eat. But they hold on, partly because they're tough fighters, and partly because Greek culture is still their superpower. Even the rebels speak Greek, read Greek books, and dream of Greek glory. The Antigonids build gymnasia in Athens, sponsor plays in Delphi, and pretend they're just protectors of Greek freedom, even when they're really in charge. It's a tricky balancing act, like trying to dance on a tightrope while holding a sword. Now, let's talk about the star of this age, Hellenistic culture. Hellenistic just means, like the Greeks, but it's so much more. It's what happens when Greek ideas meet Egyptian math, Persian art, and Babylonian astronomy, and they all decide to throw a party. Take science, for example. In Alexandria, a man named Euclid writes a book called Elements, which explains geometry so clearly that students will use it for the next 2,000 years. If you want to understand shapes, lines, and angles, he says, start here. Then there's Archimedes, from Syracuse, who figures out how levers work, give me a place to stand, and I can move the world, and invents a screw to lift water from wells. In Babylon, Greek astronomers work with local scholars to map the stars, calculating the length of a year so accurately they're only off by 6 hours. They even start to suspect that the Earth might orbit the Sun, not the other way around. Art gets a makeover too. Remember those old Greek statues, like the discus thrower, calm, perfect, like they're frozen in time? Hellenistic sculptors want more. They carve statues that show emotion, a dying Gaul, his face twisted in pain, an old woman, her back bent, carrying a basket, a boy struggling with a goose. These statues aren't just pretty, they tell stories, make you feel something. It's like comparing a still painting to a movie scene. Philosophy also gets real. In Athens, Zeno starts a school called the Stoics. Life is full of problems, he says, but you can control how you react to them. Stay calm, do your duty, and you'll be happy. Epicurus, another philosopher, teaches that happiness is simple: good friends, good food, and peace of mind. Don't worry about the gods or the afterlife, he says. Just enjoy the moment. These ideas spread like wildfire, because people, tired of war, confused by all the new cultures mixing, need something to hold on to. Even religion gets mixed up. The Egyptians have Isis, a goddess who cares about her people and promises life after death. Greek sailors start praying to her, then Romans, then people as far away as Britain. The Seleucids invent a new god, Serapis, who looks like a Greek but has Egyptian powers. It's like everyone's adding their favorite ingredients to a big, divine stew. Have you ever tried mixing two favorite foods, like chocolate and peanut butter, and been surprised how well they go together? That's Hellenistic culture. The Greeks bring their love of reason, their plays, their sports. The East brings their math, their astronomy, their rich myths. Together, they make something new that's better than either alone. Of course, it's not all perfect. The kingdoms still fight, over land, over trade, over who's more Greek. The Seleucids and Ptolemies bicker over Syria for decades, a conflict called the Syrian Wars. Slaves still toil in fields and mines, while kings live in palaces. But for a little while, in places like Alexandria, Antioch, and Pergamon, people from different worlds live together, learn from each other, and create beautiful things. By 220 BCE, the three kingdoms are solid. Ptolemaic Egypt is rich and stable, a hub of trade and learning. The Seleucid Empire, though huge, is starting to feel the strain of ruling so many different peoples. The Antigonids still struggle with Greece, but their armies are strong. And Hellenistic culture? It's everywhere, like a song that starts in one village and soon everyone's singing it. As you settle deeper into your pillow, imagine walking through the agora in Alexandria. You hear Greek, Egyptian, and Aramaic. A merchant sells silk from Persia, while a scholar argues about Euclid's theorems. A priest lights incense to Isis, and a boy practices his lines from a Greek play. This is the Hellenistic world, messy, loud, full of contradictions, but somehow, wonderfully alive. Picture a grand feast where three powerful families sit at the table, each eyeing the other's plates. That's the Greek world around 220 BCE. The Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in Asia, and the Antigonids in Macedonia are still feasting on the remains of Alexander's empire, but the laughter is forced. Under the surface, tensions simmer. Each kingdom wants more land, more wealth, more glory, and as they grab for it, cracks start to show in their own walls. This is a time of great kings and terrible mistakes, of splendor and rot, where the very things that made the Hellenistic world strong begin to tear it apart. Let's start with the biggest fight, the Syrian Wars. For decades, the Ptolemies and Seleucids bicker over Coele Syria, a strip of land along the Mediterranean that's rich in ports and farmland. It's like two siblings arguing over the last slice of cake, but with armies. The Fifth Syrian War, fought around 202 BCE, is the worst. Antiochus III, the Seleucid king, marches south with a huge army, determined to take Syria once and for all. At the Battle of Panium, his troops crush the Ptolemaic forces. Syria is mine. Antiochus declares, and he's right, this time, the Seleucids keep it. But victory comes at a cost. The Ptolemies are humiliated, their army weakened, and their king, Ptolemy V, is just a boy, controlled by scheming advisors. While the big kingdoms fight, smaller players try to survive. Pergamon, a small kingdom in Western Asia Minor, is like a clever fox dodging lions. Its king, Attalus I, sides with Rome against Macedonia, then with the Seleucids against Egypt, always picking the winning side. He uses his wealth to build a magnificent capital, with a library second only to Alexandria's and a great altar covered in sculptures of gods battling giants. We may be small, Attalus seems to say, but we're brilliant. Rhodes, an island in the Aegean, takes a different path. It stays neutral, using its powerful navy to keep the peace and protect trade. Rhodes becomes rich as a middleman, ships from Egypt, Macedonia, and Asia all stop here to trade spices, silk, and grain. The Rhodians even invent a code of maritime laws that's used across the Mediterranean. We don't need empires, they prove. We have ships and smarts. But while these smaller states thrive, the big kingdoms are rotting from the inside. Let's look at Egypt first. The Ptolemies start out strong, but by 220 BCE, their court is a snake pit of intrigue. Brothers kill brothers, queens poison rivals, and kings marry their sisters, a tradition from ancient Egypt, but one that turns the palace into a den of resentment. Ptolemy IV, who rules around 221 to 204 BCE, is more interested in parties than governing. His advisors steal from the treasury, and when a rebellion breaks out in Upper Egypt, the army is too weak to crush it quickly. The king is too busy drinking wine to notice, peasants whisper as they flee their burning villages. The Seleucid Empire has its own troubles. It's so big, stretching from Turkey to Afghanistan, that governing it is like herding cats. Local rulers in places like Bactria, modern Afghanistan, and Parthia, Iran, start acting like kings themselves, ignoring orders from Antioch. Antiochus III, called the Great, tries to fix this. He marches east, reconquering Bactria and even making a treaty with an Indian king. But when he turns west to fight Rome, he loses badly at the Battle of Magnesia in 190 BCE. The peace treaty forces him to give up Asia Minor and pay a huge fine. "We're broke," his advisors warn, but Antiochus ignores them. He robs a temple to get gold, and is killed by angry locals. Macedonia, too, is struggling. King Philip V is a tough soldier, but he makes a fatal mistake. He allies with Carthage against Rome during the Second Punic War. Rome, busy fighting Hannibal in Italy, can't respond right away, but they don't forget. When they finally turn east, Philip is ready. He conquers parts of Greece and even raids Roman allies in the Aegean. Macedonia will rule the east again, he boasts. But Rome sends an army, and at the Battle of Cynocephaly in 197 BCE, the Roman legions crush Philip's phalanx. "You will stay in your own backyard," Rome tells him, and Philip has no choice but to agree. The real disaster comes in 168 BCE, when Philip's son Perseus tries to rebel against Rome. The two armies meet at Pydna, in northern Greece. The Macedonian phalanx, with its long spears, looks unbeatable, until the Romans charge uphill, breaking the formation. The phalanx, so effective on flat ground, collapses in chaos. Perseus flees, but he's captured and paraded through Rome in chains. Macedonia is split into 4 weak republics, and Rome makes it clear, "We are in charge now." But why do these once mighty kingdoms fall apart? Let's ask that question. Partly, it's because they fight too much. The Syrian wars, the wars with Rome, the rebellions, they drain treasuries and kill soldiers. Partly, it's because their kings forget to govern. When a king spends more time plotting against his brother than fixing roads or feeding the poor, people stop trusting him. And partly, it's because the world is changing. Rome is rising, and it's hungrier, tougher, and better at making allies than any Hellenistic kingdom. There's another problem, too, the gap between rich and poor. In Egypt, thousands of peasants work the fields, paying half their crops in taxes, while the king's court eats peaches from Persia and wears silk from China. In the Seleucid Empire, Greek settlers live in nice cities with gymnasia, while local people pay heavy taxes and have no say in government. Why should we fight for these kings? They wonder, and sometimes, they don't. Even religion, which once held things together, starts to fray. The Ptolemies force Egyptians to worship the king as a god, but people whisper behind their backs. The Seleucids try to make Jews in Judea worship Greek gods, and it sparks a rebellion, the Maccabean Revolt, where ordinary people fight back, saying, "We'll die for our faith before we bow to your idols." By 168 BCE, the Hellenistic world is a shadow of its former self. Egypt is a client of Rome, the Seleucids are losing land to Parthia, and Macedonia is broken into pieces. The great libraries and schools still stand, and Greek culture still spreads, but the kingdoms that built them are weak. Rome, once a distant power, is now the new giant in the east. As you curl up under your covers, think of a once beautiful house. The walls are still strong, the paintings still hang, but the roof leaks, the windows are cracked, and the family inside is too busy arguing to fix it. That's the Hellenistic world in 168 BCE, still magnificent, but crumbling, waiting for someone to either repair it or replace it. Imagine waking up one morning to find a stranger standing in your yard, telling you how to arrange your house, what crops to plant, and who you can talk to. That's what it felt like for the Hellenistic kingdoms around 168 BCE. Rome, once a distant power across the Adriatic, was now at their doorsteps, and it wasn't here to trade or make friends. It was here to stay. Over the next 22 years, Rome would wrap its fingers around the east, squeezing until the last of Alexander's legacy gasped its final breath. This is the story of how a republic from Italy turned from a distant observer into the master of the Mediterranean, and how the proud kingdoms of the Hellenistic world crumbled under its gaze. Let's start where we left off, 168 BCE, just after the Battle of Pydna. Perseus, the last king of Macedonia, is in chains, paraded through Rome like a trophy. His kingdom, once the heart of Alexander's empire, is carved into 4 weak republics. No more kings, Rome declares. No more armies. You will send tribute to us, and you will stay out of trouble. The Macedonians seethe. Their farms are divided, their young men can't serve in a real army, and their taxes go to a foreign power. We built this land, they mutter. Who are these Romans to tell us what to do? But Rome isn't done. It turns its eyes to Greece, where the Achaean League, a union of cities like Corinth and Thebes, still dreams of freedom. The League has grown bold, thinking Rome is too busy with Macedonia to notice. They start fighting with Sparta, a city that's allied with Rome, and refuse to send soldiers when Rome asks. We're Greeks, they say. We don't take orders from Italians. Big mistake. Rome sends an army under Lucius Mummius, a general with a reputation for being unyielding. In 146 BCE, Mummius marches on Corinth, the jewel of the Achaean League. The Corinthians fight back, but their army is no match for Rome's legions. When the city falls, Mummius gives his soldiers free rein. For 3 days, they loot temples, burn homes, and sell tens of thousands of people into slavery. The great statues of Corinth, masterpieces of Hellenistic art, are packed onto ships and sent to Rome, where they'll decorate the homes of Roman nobles. This is what happens to those who defy us, Rome announces. Corinth is left in ruins, a ghost town to remind others of their place. Why was Rome so harsh? Let's wonder that for a moment. Partly, it's fear. The Greeks have a way of rising up, of thinking they're better than everyone else. Rome wants to crush that spirit before it spreads. Partly, it's greed. Corinth is rich, a hub of trade, and Rome wants its wealth. But mostly, it's a message: we are in charge now. Obey, or disappear. Meanwhile, in Asia Minor, the Seleucid Empire is fading fast. Antiochus IV, who ruled after Antiochus III, tries to revive its glory. He marches into Egypt, almost takes Alexandria, and even tries to make the Jews in Judea worship Greek gods, sparking the Maccabean revolt, where a band of Jewish rebels fights back, saying, "We'll die before we bow to your idols." But Antiochus is no Alexander. His victories are short-lived, and when Rome sends a messenger to tell him to leave Egypt, he has to obey. The messenger, Gaius Popilius Laenas, draws a circle in the sand around Antiochus and says, "Answer before you step out of this circle." Antiochus, humiliated, backs down. A king of the Seleucids, once rulers of half the known world, now takes orders from a man who draws lines in the sand. The Seleucids aren't the only ones struggling. The Ptolemies in Egypt are a shadow of their former selves. Ptolemy VI and his brother Ptolemy VIII fight over the throne for years, turning the palace into a battlefield. They beg Rome to pick a winner, and Rome does, choosing whichever brother promises more tribute. "Egypt is our granary now," Roman senators joke. "We'll let them bicker as long as the grain keeps coming." By 146 BCE, the Nile Valley is a client of Rome, its kings little more than puppets. Even the smaller states that once thrived, Pergamon, Rhodes, feel Rome's squeeze. Pergamon, which sided with Rome against Macedonia and the Seleucids, thinks it's safe. But when King Attalus III dies in 133 BCE, he leaves his kingdom to Rome in his will. "Better to give it freely than have it taken by force," he supposedly says. Rhodes, once a powerful naval state, makes the mistake of trying to stay neutral during Rome's wars. Rome punishes it by building a free port on the island of Delos, draining Rhodes' trade and turning it into a backwater. Loyalty pays, Rome reminds everyone. Neutrality gets you nothing. What's sad is how little resistance there is. The Hellenistic kingdoms are too weak, too divided, too tired. Their armies are small, their treasuries empty, and their people have lost faith in their kings. When Rome marches in, some locals even cheer. Maybe the Romans will fix things, they hope. Maybe they'll stop the wars, lower the taxes, let us live in peace. But peace under Rome is a mixed blessing. Greek cities keep their gymnasia and theaters, and scholars still study at Alexandria. But the kings are gone, replaced by Roman governors and tax collectors. Greek is still spoken, but Latin starts to creep in, especially in government. The great libraries and schools survive, but they no longer drive innovation, they preserve the past, like mummies in a tomb. By 146 BCE, the map of the East looks nothing like it did in 301 BCE. Macedonia is a Roman province. Greece is under Roman rule. The Seleucids cling to a sliver of Syria, and Egypt is a Roman puppet. The only thing left of Alexander's dream is the culture, the art, the ideas, the way of life that blends Greek and Eastern traditions. But even that is changing, slowly, under Roman influence. As you snuggle deeper into your bed, think of a once grand theater. The curtains are fading, the seats are cracked, and the orchestra is gone. But the stage is still there, and people still come to watch plays, even if they're not as good as they used to be. That's the Hellenistic world in 146 BCE, broken, but not forgotten, waiting to see what the Romans will make of its legacy. Let the quiet of the night wrap around you as we step into a world where the sun is setting on an age. It's 146 BCE, and Rome has already planted its flag in Greece and Macedonia. But three Hellenistic kingdoms cling to life, the Seleucids in Syria, the Ptolemies in Egypt, and a handful of smaller states gasping for air. Over the next 116 years, they'll fight, scheme, and beg for survival, some with dignity, some with desperation, while Rome looms larger, like a storm cloud that won't pass. This is the story of their last stand, of kings and queens who tried to outwit Rome, and of how even the cleverest plans couldn't stop the inevitable. Let's start with the Seleucids, once rulers of a realm stretching from Turkey to Afghanistan. By 146 BCE, they're a shadow of themselves, clinging to Syria and parts of Mesopotamia. Their biggest threat isn't Rome, it's the Parthians, a warrior people from Iran who've been nibbling at their eastern borders. In 130 BCE, King Antiochus VII tries to push the Parthians back. He wins a few battles, reclaims Mesopotamia, and for a moment, it looks like a comeback. But then he's killed in a skirmish, and the Parthians seize Babylon, the jewel of the East. We're not just losing land, Seleucid nobles mourn. We're losing our soul. The Seleucids' court becomes a revolving door of boy kings, regents, and rebels. One ruler after another is assassinated or overthrown, each weaker than the last. By 64 BCE, when the Roman general Pompey marches into Syria, there's barely a kingdom left to conquer. He annexes it as a Roman province without firing a shot. The Seleucid Empire, which once dreamed of reviving Alexander's glory, fades away like a whisper. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the Ptolemies are putting on a tragic play of their own. The palace in Alexandria is a nest of poison and plotting. Brothers marry sisters, uncles kill nephews, and every generation seems more incompetent than the last. Ptolemy VIII, nicknamed Physcon, Potbelly, is so hated that when he dies, mobs drag his body through the streets. His daughter, Cleopatra III, fights with her own son, Ptolemy X, for control, burning temples and killing thousands in the process. "We're not governing Egypt," a scribe writes in despair. "We're burning it down." But then, in 51 BCE, a young woman takes the throne, Cleopatra VII. You've probably heard of her. She's the one with the clever mind, the sharp tongue, and a gift for turning enemies into allies. When she becomes queen at 18, Egypt is bankrupt, Roman troops are camped on its borders, and her brother, and husband, thanks to Ptolemaic tradition, is trying to push her aside. Cleopatra doesn't just fight back, she outsmarts everyone. She sneaks into Rome in 48 BCE, hidden in a rolled-up carpet, to meet Julius Caesar. "Help me keep my throne," she says, "and Egypt will be your friend." Caesar, charmed by her wit and beauty, agrees. With Roman help, she defeats her brother and rules alone. After Caesar is assassinated in 44 BCE, Cleopatra sets her sights on Mark Antony, one of Rome's most powerful generals. They fall in love, form an alliance, and have 3 children. Antony gives her back parts of the Seleucid Empire, Syria, Lebanon, parts of Turkey, as a gift. "We'll rule the East together," they promise each other. But Rome sees this as treason. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, declares war. The final showdown comes in 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium, off the coast of Greece. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet faces Octavian's navy. For hours, ships crash into each other, arrows fly, and men drown. Then, something unexpected happens. Cleopatra's flagship turns and sails away. No one knows why. Maybe she panics, maybe it's a trick that backfires. Antony, seeing her go, abandons his men to follow. The battle is lost. Octavian marches on Alexandria the next year. Antony, hearing false rumors that Cleopatra is dead, stabs himself. When he learns she's alive, he has himself carried to her palace, where he dies in her arms. Cleopatra, knowing Octavian will parade her through Rome as a trophy, chooses her own end. She puts an asp, a poisonous snake, to her breast and dies, just 39 years old. With her death, the Ptolemaic Empire ends. Egypt becomes a Roman province, its grain feeding Rome for centuries. What about the other small states? Judea, which rebelled against the Seleucids in the Maccabean revolt, wins independence for a while. But when King Herod the Great takes over in 37 BCE, he rules as a Roman puppet, building grand palaces and temples to please his masters. Better to be a king in Rome's shadow than no king at all, he tells his people, though many hate him for it. Pergamon, which gave itself to Rome in 133 BCE, thrives as a province. Its library is copied, its art admired, and its people keep speaking Greek. Rhodes, once a naval power, fades into obscurity, its harbors quiet without the bustle of trade. Why did these kingdoms fall? Let's think about that. It's not just that Rome was stronger, though its legions and discipline helped. It's that the Hellenistic kingdoms forgot how to unite. The Seleucids fought among themselves, the Ptolemies poisoned each other, and even the small states bickered instead of joining forces. Rome, for all its flaws, knew how to stay focused. Divide and conquer, their generals liked to say, and it worked. But here's the thing, even as the kingdoms died, their culture lived on. Roman nobles hired Greek tutors, collected Greek art, and spoke Greek at parties. The Library of Alexandria kept growing, its scrolls copied and sent to Rome. Greek philosophy, Stoicism, Epicureanism, shaped how Romans thought about virtue and happiness. We've conquered their lands, a Roman senator admits, but they've conquered our minds. By 30 BCE, the last of Alexander's successors are gone. The Hellenistic Age, which began with a dream of a united world, ends with Rome as the sole master of the Mediterranean. But the ideas, the art, the way of life that blended Greek and Eastern traditions, they don't disappear. They become part of Rome, then part of the world that comes after. As your eyes grow heavy, imagine a garden where flowers from different lands grow together. Some are old, some are new, but they all make the garden beautiful. That's what happened to the Hellenistic world. Its kings and kingdoms faded, but their legacy bloomed, in Rome and beyond. Breathe in the salt air of Alexandria, 30 BCE. The Pharos lighthouse still blazes at night, its beam cutting through the dark like a golden sword, but the city feels different. Tension hangs in the air, thick as the incense in the temple of Serapis. Roman soldiers march through the streets, their armor clinking, while Egyptians and Greeks whisper to each other, eyes darting. Vendors in the agora hurry to pack their wares, as if sensing a storm. This is the end. Not a bang, but a slow, sad exhale, the last gasp of the Hellenistic world. Let's rewind a little, to the months before the fall. After the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, where Octavian's fleet crushed the combined forces of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, the queen fled back to Egypt with her lover in tow. Alexandria, once a hub of laughter and learning, became a city of whispers. Will the Romans spare us? Mothers asked their children. What will happen to our library? Scholars wondered. Cleopatra, ever the performer, tried to keep up appearances. She hosted grand feasts in her palace, where guests dined on peacock tongues and drank wine from golden cups, but the smiles were forced. Behind closed doors, she packed her treasures, statues of Alexander, scrolls from the library, jewels from Nubia, preparing for a last stand. Antony, meanwhile, grew increasingly desperate. He sent messengers to Octavian, offering to surrender if Cleopatra's safety was guaranteed, but Octavian refused. "She belongs to Rome," he replied. Antony, a proud general who'd once led armies across the east, now paced his chambers, muttering about honor and defeat. His soldiers, many of whom were Greeks or Egyptians, began deserting, slipping away to their villages. "Why fight for a lost cause?" they said. In the spring of 30 BCE, Octavian's army crossed into Egypt. They met little resistance. Most towns opened their gates without a fight. When they reached Alexandria, Cleopatra retreated to her mausoleum, a towering stone structure overlooking the harbor, filled with her most precious possessions. She sent word to Octavian, "I will surrender, but only if I can keep my throne as a Roman ally." Octavian's answer was cold, "Come to Rome, and we'll discuss it." They both knew what that meant, a humiliating parade, where she'd be chained like a prisoner, displayed as a trophy of war. On August 1st, a servant rushed into Antony's quarters with news: "Cleopatra is dead." The queen had sent a false message, perhaps to test his loyalty, perhaps in a moment of despair. Antony, overcome with grief, drew his sword and stabbed himself. As he lay dying, another servant arrived, screaming, "She's alive! She's in the mausoleum!" Antony begged to be carried there. When he was lifted into Cleopatra's arms, he whispered, "I die a Roman," before taking his last breath. Cleopatra, now alone, donned her most magnificent robes, a dress of purple silk, embroidered with gold thread, the traditional garb of an Egyptian pharaoh. She sat on a golden couch, surrounded by her two handmaidens, Iras and Charmian, and ordered a basket of figs brought to her. Hidden among the fruit was an asp, a small but deadly snake. "Let Rome have my body," she said, "but not my dignity." She let the asp bite her on the breast, and within moments, she was dead. Iras fell dead beside her, and Charmian, as she adjusted Cleopatra's crown, gasped, "It was well done, as befits a queen," before collapsing. When Octavian entered the mausoleum, he paused at the sight. "She was a great queen," he said, though no one knows if he meant it. He ordered her buried beside Antony, a small act of respect. Then he turned to his generals. "Egypt is now a province of Rome. Take inventory of the treasury, secure the library, and send word to Rome, our empire is whole." But the end of the Hellenistic Age is about more than just Egypt. It's about the fading of a unique way of life. In Antioch, once the glittering capital of the Seleucid Empire, Roman soldiers now patrolled the streets, their Latin shouts mixing with Greek and Aramaic. The Great Agora, where merchants from Persia and Arabia once haggled, now sold Roman olive oil and wine. In Pergamon, the library that once rivaled Alexandria's was packed up and sent to Rome, its scrolls to be displayed in the homes of wealthy senators. In Athens, the Academy and Lyceum still taught philosophy, but their students now included Roman youths, sent to learn Greek wisdom before returning home to rule. What made the Hellenistic world special? It was a place where a Greek merchant could marry an Egyptian priestess, where a Persian noble could quote Homer, where a Jewish scribe could write in Greek. It was messy, sometimes violent, but always curious, always reaching for something new. Rome, for all its power, was more interested in order than innovation. It wanted to govern the world, not transform it. Yet even Rome couldn't resist the allure of Hellenistic culture. Octavian, now called Augustus, built a temple to Apollo in Rome, modeled after the Parthenon. He hired Greek sculptors to carve his statues, Greek poets to write his triumphs. His successor, Tiberius, studied Stoic philosophy in Rhodes, speaking Greek better than Latin. "We've conquered them," a Roman senator joked, "but they've conquered our taste." The Library of Alexandria, that symbol of Hellenistic curiosity, would survive for centuries more, though it would suffer fires and neglect. Its scrolls, plays by Menander, treatises by Archimedes, histories by Polybius, would be copied and recopied, carried by monks to Constantinople, by traders to Baghdad, by scholars to Florence. They would outlive the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic caliphates. They would inspire Galileo to look at the stars, Michelangelo to chisel marble, Shakespeare to write plays. As you drift to sleep, imagine Alexander the Great standing on the shores of the Mediterranean, 300 years after his death. He sees a Roman ship sailing past, its sails emblazoned with an eagle, but its captain is reading a Greek poem. He sees a temple in Antioch, where Romans worship Jupiter, but the priests wear Egyptian linen. He sees a boy in Alexandria, writing his lessons in Latin, but his teacher is a Greek philosopher. Alexander smiles, because he realizes, empires rise and fall, but ideas are forever. The Hellenistic Age ended in 30 BCE, but its spirit, curious, bold, unafraid to mix and grow, lives on. It's in the way we still reach across cultures, across languages, across time, to learn from one another. Let the hush of the night wrap around you like a soft cloak as we wander through time, past emperors and scholars, monks and merchants, to see how the Hellenistic world refused to fade. It's 30 BCE, and the last of its kingdoms has crumbled under Rome's might. But here's the magic: what people create with their minds and hands outlives thrones and armies. The ideas born in Alexandria's library, the statues carved in Pergamon's workshops, the stories told in Antioch's agora, they didn't vanish. They melted into the world, like honey into tea, sweetening and shaping everything they touched. This is the story of how a civilization, though gone, still whispers in our ears, builds our cities, and sparks our curiosity. Imagine stepping into a Roman villa in 50 CE. The owner, a wealthy senator, leads you through his garden, where a marble fountain splashes in a pool. "Look at this," he says, gesturing to a statue of a boy struggling with a goose, his face twisted in laughter, his muscles tensed as if alive. "It's a copy of a Hellenistic original," he explains, running a finger over the boy's chiseled cheek. "The Greeks knew how to catch life in stone, don't you think?" In his study, scrolls line the shelves. Euclid's Elements sits next to a Roman law book, a play by Menander, its pages worn from reading, rests beside a letter from Cicero. "We Romans conquer lands," he admits, "but the Greeks conquer minds." Now walk into a classroom in Athens, 150 CE. A teacher named Galen stands before his students, holding a wax model of the human brain. "Herophilus first showed us this," he says, pointing to the cerebellum. He dissected bodies in Alexandria's museum 400 years ago, and what he learned still guides us. The students lean in, scribbling notes. One asks, "Why does this matter?" Galen smiles. "Because the Greeks taught us to question, to cut open the world and see how it works, not just accept stories. That curiosity will one day lead to vaccines, MRIs, and the understanding that diseases spread through germs, not angry gods." Travel east to Constantinople in 500 CE, where the Byzantine Empire thrives. In the Hagia Sophia, workers hoist a massive dome into place, its curve inspired by the Pantheon in Rome, which itself borrowed from Hellenistic architects who first mastered the math of curved roofs. Alexander's dream of a world united by beauty, "We're still building it," an architect says, wiping sweat from his brow. In the city's libraries, monks copy Plato's Republic by candlelight, their quills scratching Greek words onto parchment. These books survived the fall of Rome, one monk whispers. They'll survive us, too. Journey to Baghdad in 900 CE, where a scholar named Al-Kindi sits surrounded by scrolls. He's translating Ptolemy's Almagest, a Hellenistic star chart, into Arabic, his pen flying over the page. The Greeks mapped the stars with numbers, he tells his students, pointing to a diagram of the zodiac. They didn't just look up, they calculated. Nearby, another scholar, Al-Razi, studies Galen's medical texts, using them to write a book on diseases that will be used in Europe for 500 years. What we learn from them, Al-Razi says, we pass to the world. Skip to Florence in 1480 CE, where a young artist named Michelangelo stands in a workshop, staring at a fragment of a Hellenistic statue, a torso, its muscles rippling with tension. "This is how the body moves," he mutters, sketching furiously. Later, when he carves his David, he'll channel that same energy, the Hellenistic love of life, of strength, of humanity. Down the street, a mathematician named Luca Pacioli pores over a copy of Euclid's Elements, recently brought from Constantinople. "These proofs," he says, "show us that the world follows rules, rules we can understand." His work will help inspire the scientific revolution. Now, let's peek into a modern classroom. A teacher draws a triangle on the board, explaining the Pythagorean theorem, an idea first formalized by Hellenistic mathematicians. "Why does this matter?" a student asks. "Because it works," the teacher says. "Build a bridge, send a rocket to the moon, you need this." Outside, the school's layout is a grid, just like Alexandria's streets. Its gymnasium, where kids play basketball, echoes the Greek gymnasium, where boys once exercised and debated philosophy. Look at your bookshelf. That copy of the Iliad? Its first full translation into Latin was done by a Roman poet who studied Hellenistic scholars. The biography of Marie Curie? Her love of science traces back to Archimedes, who shouted, "Eureka!" in his bathtub. Even your favorite superhero movie, its focus on flawed, emotional heroes? That's Hellenistic too. The Greeks didn't just tell stories of gods, they told stories of people, with all their courage and fear. Religion, too, bears the mark. The Virgin Mary, with her gentle gaze in Renaissance paintings? Artists modeled her after Hellenistic statues of Isis, the Egyptian goddess of motherhood, one faith's icon borrowing from another, just as in Alexandria's temples. The idea of a universal church, open to all people, not just one tribe? That's rooted in the Hellenistic belief that humanity is one family. Ever used a coin with a ruler's face on it? Thank the Hellenistic kings, who first stamped their portraits on currency to say, "I rule here." Ever marveled at a skyscraper's steel frame? Its design uses principles of leverage and weight distribution first worked out by Archimedes. Ever felt homesick for a place you've never been? That's the Hellenistic spirit too, the longing to connect, to belong to something bigger than yourself. Why does this legacy endure? Because the Hellenistic world was built on curiosity. It asked, what if we mix Greek and Egyptian? What if we measure the stars, not just worship them? What if a slave and a king can both be human? These are questions we're still asking. They're the glue of civilization. As your eyes grow heavy, think of a river. Alexander's conquests were the spring that fed it, the Hellenistic kingdoms were its rushing current, Rome, Byzantium, the Islamic world, the Renaissance, they were its bends and rapids. Today, we're still floating on its waters. The river changes, but it never dries up. Good night, dear one. Sleep well, and know this: when you wonder, when you create, when you reach out to someone different from you, you're keeping the Hellenistic spirit alive. It's in you, as it's in all of us.